Hey folks, welcome to Uncommon Sense in Current Times. I'm Peter Demas. I'm here to talk about something that I think is extremely important for us to deal with and wrestle with. We have Thanksgiving that's coming up right around the corner. We got Christmas right after this. And one of the things that has seemed to make the headlines recently is this idea that we are to disinvite or uninvite people that we disagree with politically. There was a chief of psychiatry resident for Yale University that said, well, that this ought to happen because the reason why we shouldn't be around these people and people that voted for Trump, you shouldn't allow them to come to your Thanksgiving because it's just too detrimental to them mentally and psychologically. It got some popular support from The View, and The View, who I rarely agree with, and I think is most of the time wrong. They even they said that they would agree with this. Whoopi Goldberg didn't go all the way that far, and she even made some comment about the fact that we ought to that if she had a member or a child that was a member of the LGBT community, that she wouldn't want to invite people there because it would be too terrible for them to not be understood. And this whole idea that we are to basically separate ourselves from family because we disagree with each other politically. Now, there is a whole lot of conversation and talk about this. And I think there's a bigger picture that people are missing that especially as Christians, we ought to recognize and be able to need to address. But we're part of the problem that we're seeing as conservatives, as Christians, and that part of the problem that we're seeing is the fact that we have that we're seeing it again as this political division that's there, and it's all surrounding whether President Trump. It's all surrounding his election, whether we voted for him or didn't vote for him. This goes back to 2016, 2020, and now 2024. And there has been this hatred that has gone out, particularly against those who have voted for Trump. But the problem is that many of the Trump supporters are almost embracing it. And we're handling it inappropriately because we've dealt with about 8 years of being attacked. We've dealt with the idea of trying to determine whether trying to battle the some of the lies concerning January 6th. With the little spatterings of truth that are in there. There were some of the lies concerning the 2020 election, that was in there with some spattering of truth in there from the other direction. We're seeing all this stuff and we just don't know exactly how to respond. So we've taken this, we've almost become what the Democrats have allowed themselves to become in a lot of ways, which is victims. And because of that, we have decided to lash back out in certain ways, which one of the ways we shouldn't have. And we're seeing a lot of this stuff. And as a result, we're having people in academia who said that medically speaking, scientifically speaking, that you should not have family around there. And then it's being reinforced in the popular atmosphere of daytime television by agreeing with this and saying this is correct. The problem that I see, and I think it's a much bigger problem, is that this is an attack upon family. There was a pastor, James MacDonald, who said a long time ago, he said, when the church is attacked, when Satan wants to attack, he attacks the church and he attacks the family. And we're seeing this attack on family, and we've seen it increase over and over again. Over the last 15, 20 years in particular, it seems to have ramped up a lot more. Now, I think the attack has been occurring longer than that, and I think we can go back and look at history to determine this. But I think we all can agree that it seemed to have sped up in intensity, and I think that is where part of our problem is and part of what we are having to address with this. But there, no matter what, is an attack upon family. Recognize that family is God's idea. Family is something that God created for us. He created us, so when he created man, he gave us woman so that man would not be alone. This idea that we are supposed to procreate, that is part of one of the responsibilities and one of the assignments that we were given, is to be able to have children, or at least attempt to have children. And I think, so we see that from there in Timothy, and I think this is a great Bible verse that kind of reflects this from the New Testament. In 1 Timothy 5:8, it says, "But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his own household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." What they're saying is, and what Paul is saying here through the Holy Spirit, is that it's better to be an unbeliever than it is for you to reject and not provide for your family. And providing for your family does not always mean financially. I think in this context it does, and I think we have an obligation and a duty to provide for our family, but there's more. People are made up of more than just their physical needs. We have to provide for them spiritually. We have to provide for them emotionally. We have to provide for them physically. We're made up of a mind, body, heart, and spirit. We have to provide for all of these things in order to provide for all of it. Some of us are better than others at certain areas of it, but that's part of what family does. Is family are supposed to be able to get together regardless of how we agree or disagree with things. In my family, at Thanksgiving, there is first of all, when I grew up, I didn't celebrate Thanksgiving. My family is Greek. They came from Greece, or my grandfather came from Greece. And as a result, they don't celebrate Thanksgiving over in Greece. And so it just never really was a big deal to us. It was just kind of one of those things that if we happen to be off, we might do something. I remember a couple times my family went to casinos for Thanksgiving. It was not a big deal. We didn't have a very big, large, extended family we were close to. So from that, we just didn't do a whole lot. I mean, it was just Thanksgiving was not a big deal. Christmas was always a huge deal for us, but Thanksgiving never really was. Now, my wife, when we got married, and I became part of her family as well. Their family was did huge celebrations of Thanksgiving, and it was new for me. And now we've taken on that tradition. So now I do all the cooking for Thanksgiving. We have a couple people that might help doing a couple little things, but for the most part, we're cooking, and I cook for anywhere from 12 to 20 people, just depending on who is able to show up for Thanksgiving in each given year that we have. And I enjoy it, and we get together and we talk, and fortunately for us, almost all of us agree politically. There's a couple people that disagree politically, but guess what? They're still invited. They will still show if they choose, if they're not having to work. A couple of them live in other states, and so it's more difficult for them to get to us. But when we're done with this, and when we're all this is at the end of the day, we can get together and disagree politically. Actually, where we seem to disagree more is that the majority of my wife's family is University of Tennessee football fans. I, on the other hand, am not. My daughter is not. And so there is usually a disagreement and an argument on whether or not, on how good UT football really is, whether they're overrated, underrated, whether or not the refs favor them or not favor them. That's where we fight more often over those issues, but we do discuss political issues. We don't shy away from it. And if someone disagrees, we don't shy away and shout them down and make them feel terrible because they disagree. We actually talk about it and present both sides to this. But what happens is that when we're seeing people in academia and in popular culture, and when we see these people that encourage the removal of family and trying to encourage distancing yourself from family and being able to do so, recognize this is an attack upon what God has set forth for us. This is nothing more than that attack. And we're seeing it in so many other areas in just little different ways. Many of you who are listening to this are participating in that attack upon family without maybe even realizing you're doing so. You may think that you support American family values. You may think that you support this level of morality, while at the same time not. And I'm encouraging you, when I list some of these things off on these attacks that we're having upon family right now, that This is not as a means of condemning you, because that's not my job, but it is a means of hopefully being able to at least open your eyes and help maybe kind of convict you in some of the things that you might say, hey, I need to change. Because as long as we continue to allow the family to attack, we're allowing Satan to win. And we have to be able to reverse this. And so what I want to do is I want to cover some of these issues, some of these areas that and this is not an all-inclusive list, but some of these areas that I'm seeing where families are being attacked. But then I also want to talk about what we need to do at Thanksgiving, how we can address and talk about the other side, so that we're not giving the other side the excuse to not come around us at Thanksgiving, to not have these ways of separating ourselves. By the way, do you honestly think that this is better for our mental health to be separated from people that have been around you and love you? I will tell you, I know people, families whose children will not show up because they're Christian, who have grandchildren that they've never met or they only met a few times, and their children don't want them to be around, and they literally have separated themselves. I know the pain and hurt that they're going through not being able to be around their children. Some of them strongly disagree with the lifestyles, and literally every month when I meet with this certain group of people, they ask for prayer to be reunited, and they strongly disagree with the way the person's living their life. They recognize the destruction that they're doing in their own lives, but they pray every time they come back. Jesus talks about it, and it's a much greater sense of the prodigal son. And when he talks about the fact that when the prodigal son, and for those of you who don't know the story, the prodigal son is somebody who decided to follow greed, decided to follow partying, decided to do this stuff, and he left and went and blew all of his side of the inheritance, and then blew it and was destitute and was basically he was in a terrible shape. And he said, you know what, at least if I can go home, I can at least be a servant. And when he came home, his father was so overwhelmed with joy that he welcomed him back into the house. Now, I don't know about the inheritance side. I don't know about all that other stuff. Jesus doesn't go into that. But I do know that he welcomed him back as a son, because then the father was so overwhelmed, they threw a party for the return of the son. Now, again, there's greater spiritual significance, and we can go into all that some other time if you want. But in reality is we're seeing this is how they really are. People really want to be around their family, even if they disagree. And to discourage that is actually an attack upon a family, but also the mental health there. So some of the issues that I see family being attacked is that there are those of you who are selfishly cohabiting with each other. You aren't getting married. You may have children, you may not have children, but you're not getting married. You might do it for economic reasons, or you might do it for commitment reasons, etc. But bottom line is that's an attack upon the family. When you're choosing to basically pretend to be a family while not being a family, and not being a family in God's eyes, you're allowing that division. You're allowing the redefinition of family. Just the same way that when two members of the LGBT community think they can get married, and legally they can get married, but in the eyes of God they are not married, and as a result of that, they're again, is part of that division of family. God defines what family is. For us to sit there and say we're going to be family even though we're not technically married, and we're going to be family even though that we're not a man and wife, we're saying, God, you're wrong. And anytime you tell God he's wrong, you're wrong. It's simple. We all do it. I've engaged in behaviors that where I recognize that and seen that later, and that's when our job is to repent, and that's our job is to turn around on that. Have you ever been stranded with a flat tire in the middle of nowhere? My first semester home from college, I was driving back to college, and that's what happened. I was halfway between two places, a couple miles from the exits, and I had to walk miles in the cold to get to a phone. That's why I would have loved at that point in time to have Air Moto, and that's why I bought it for my wife and kids, especially when they're traveling to remote places. With Air Moto, they don't have to depend on anyone else for help. They don't have to depend on walking or waiting in their car, hoping that nobody comes along while they're waiting for their friends or family to pick them up. This compact, high-quality tool is always ready to go. You can put it right in the glove box, and it can actually inflate all 4 vehicle tires in a matter of minutes. It's powerful, it's reliable, and it gives my family peace of mind. Airmoto keeps us prepared for all the things that can happen to us with our tires while we're going. It's a great Christmas gift this year, and it'll just help you kind of just feel very comfortable for your wife and family as they travel. So highly encourage you to get it. You can go to airmoto.com, or you can check out the link below in there and click through the link in order to order yours today. I see so many times, and these are people within the Christian schools that I've been associated with, who've encouraged their children underage not only just to drink alcohol, because again, I don't think there's anything wrong with being a 16-year-old if it was legal to drink alcohol. I do think it's wrong to encourage your children to drink when it is against the law. I do think that, but I do really strongly disagree if you're encouraging your children to get drunk, and I've seen that time and time again. We're seeing the attack on our families with abortion, not only in allowing it, but also states that are promoting abortion tourism from coming there. We're seeing it with the trafficking of children, the abuse, prostitution. By the way, we shouldn't be having this much sex trafficking if the people out there weren't actually engaging in the practices of pedophilia. This is on you. This is on the people that you know. There are people around me right now, I guarantee, that are engaging in this type of behavior that I have no earthly idea about. They're around. It's occurring with such volume because we could not be having the trafficking problems that we're having with children unless there's a market for it from there. I see us destroying the families whenever we put ourselves too much in youth sports, encouraging our children to be the next football star, baseball star, when they might possibly be able to get a scholarship. They might possibly be to college, but maybe not go for there. I'm not saying that those are wrong and inherently wrong, but I am saying that when you substitute youth sports for family, then that's wrong. We should not be putting family aside in order to be able to do that. And again, I think they can line up with each other. Both my kids played sports. We did not play travel ball for various reasons on why we didn't. But at the same time, this is an attack upon family whenever it is doing nothing but encouraging your children to follow the idol of sports. And I think that we have to be very careful there. Again, there's a balance here on this. We have to basically, the men need to rise up and be men. We're not doing that. We're allowing men to kind of take the back seat to everything. We're even in superhero movies, we're beginning to see this change, or not even superhero movies. I'm talking about just regular action movies. We're seeing this change. Again, nothing wrong with it. I enjoy these movies. I watch them, but at the same time, when you're seeing it only go in that direction, when you're seeing it only have these boundaries, where when we're watching these TV shows, where we're seeing people, no matter what, just engage with anybody they want to from a sexual perspective, that puts ideas in people's minds, and it is an attack upon family. We see a lot of the stuff that's happening. We're seeing the pornography that is being put in the schools. You don't think that's an attack upon family? Look, we took prayer out of public schools in the early 60s. When you took prayer into public schools, it wasn't much later where we started seeing changes. And now those children are actually raising the kids now, and we're wondering why we have a morality issue. Where do you think the morality starts? Morality starts with the eyes of God. But again, when we start changing the way that we're attacking family and addressing family at this point in time within the school system, by introducing pornography, by telling them this is what a normal relationship is supposed to be like, when we don't put the stricter age requirements on pornographic sites, when we don't do things like this, it's an attack upon the family. Pornography addiction is skyrocketing, especially among our youth, especially among your children, boys and girls. Don't think it's not happening. When we're allowing the open borders that we've allowed and allowing fentanyl to cross so that people will just die, that's an attack upon our family. We're seeing, and it's not just fentanyl either. I mean, we're seeing it with meth labs, we're seeing it with other things, but we're also seeing it with the, again, I talked about alcohol earlier, we're seeing it with marijuana. We're seeing this. We're seeing where anything that we can do in order, just little chips, and a lot of these little chips everywhere around, and then all of a sudden now we got a big problem and it's too late to address it. So the way that they're able to say we're going to disinvite them to a family, it's because they've already laid a foundation that family is not something that's that important. They have literally tried to remove it as one of the pillars of our society. If we can remove family, then we can start taking away a lot of these things. And now we can say, well, it's okay for you to remove them from political ideologies. Now, part of the problem, I think, is us. I think it's how we handle them when they come in. I think whenever we sit there and we say to people, that when they come and they express a differing viewpoint, and we shout them down or attack them the way that so many of us have been accused in a public sense. So what we see on social media, what we see out there, we cannot engage in the same behaviors we're accusing them of being wrong on. That's not something that we can do. So one of the things that I would recommend, and I think we ought to talk about, is how to engage in these conversations. What should we do as people that, and this is true for both sides, but I'm going to address it more from the conservative side, people that are Trump supporters that are going into their liberal families, I think, or having liberal family members come into your conservative family. I think both ways we have to be able to address it. And I want to address it from that perspective of it, because I think it's critical in order to means of having freedom and to encourage everybody to be able to engage in free speech. If we don't honor it within our core group of people, we can't honor it within family, then how are we going to manifest it out in the community and out in culture? It starts with the family. Now, does that mean that my 6-year-old can now smack talk me and cuss me out in order of free speech? No. There's still boundaries based off of age. But at the same time, I'm talking about adults in this situation when I'm talking about the family and the encouragement of free speech within your family. There are things that we have to be able to do. Now, again, does this mean that you should tolerate people who are belligerent? No. Does this mean that you should tolerate people who might get violent? Absolutely not. We have a right to defend ourselves, and we should defend ourselves in these situations. But I think we should start off the conversation with this, is don't spike the ball with a win. That's just the first thing from there. After this, we don't need to. We've already won. We don't need to gloat. We don't need to be rubbing it in. We don't need to be talking about it as if we were the ones that actually won the office ourselves. We were part of a process. We were part of that. Now, if you and your friends had a side bet on it, yeah, you can kind of maybe kind of joke around and talk about it from there with it, but that's all in the context of fun and joking, etc. But if it's a real discussion and you know that they're taking this very seriously, don't disinvite them by making them feel bad by coming. Don't put yourself in a situation where they're going to accuse you of being belligerent, where they're going to accuse you of acting bad so that they can disinvite you for Christmas. We have to be able to engage in this situation. So one of the ways I think that we can do this, instead of focusing on what happened in the past, we need to start continuing to focus on what's happening on the future. I call it a verb tense rule. And what happens is that if you notice, whenever people use their verb tense, there implies something much deeper than that. So for example, if I use something in the past tense, that generally that implies that there's blame involved. If I'm using present tense, it's generally something that is a moral standard, and there is a morality value hidden somewhere in there. And future tense generally involves some type of solution. This isn't a 100% rule, but it is a basic rule that I think you can apply. So whenever someone wants to talk about things that were in the past, and they want to criticize Trump for something he may have done in the past, even whether it was true or not true, shift the focus. One of the things that I can anticipate happening at the Thanksgiving table is that your liberal friends will probably bring up January 6th and bring that up. Now, most people who follow January 6th, anybody who's really followed this show for a long time, recognize that there's a lot more to it than what is being reported in the media. There is a whole lot more to it than that indicates that January 6th was not as bad as going all the way back to the Civil War, which is, some of the politicians' talking points are on it. There's a lot of great documentaries on it. I encourage you to do it. War on Truth is one of them. Babylon Bee, which I have not seen that. They have a documentary on it. I don't know. I can't advocate it or not advocate it. I just know it's out there, but I would assume their work is pretty good, probably funny as well. But I would encourage you to maybe, kind of look at those things, but not to argue it point by point. We don't have to win every point to win the war. By the way, we won the election with a popular vote and electoral vote. We won the election. There's no reason at all why we should have to win every minor point of that's happened in January 6th. But I think we can look at it in the future. And I think we can do it by asking questions. And one of the questions I think you can ask easily is, what do you recommend doing if we feel like there is a wrong within our country that needs to be corrected? How do you think that we should be able to react and respond to it? I think we should be able to look at it and put it back onto them in a means of saying, how would you solve this problem? Okay, let's just assume January 6th was bad. Let's assume that it was wrong. Then what do we do moving forward? How do we do it? What do we look at going forward so that we don't have another January 6th, but we also don't sit back and take it? If they don't think that the election was stolen in 2020, I don't want to sit down and prove to them and show them the numbers with what happened in Wisconsin and the flood in Atlanta. We're not going to talk about that type of stuff. That's irrelevant now. That's only relevant from a historical debate, historical context. But sitting around your kitchen table, it's not the appropriate time to do so. It may be an appropriate time at some other point in time to have that conversation, to be able to do that. But at the same time, I think at this point in time, we got to say, okay, what if the election really was stolen? I know you don't believe it's stolen, but what if it really was stolen? If it really was stolen, what do we do? What is our responsibility as Americans to be able to ensure that our vote is there? Should we sit back and be quiet about it, or should we protest? When we protest, where should we be protesting? Should we be burning down buildings in Minneapolis? Don't go that far. But you get my point. It's something to that effect. Is that how we need to protest? Is by many of the protests that has happened in our country, not talking about just the Black Lives Matter protests, that happened in Minneapolis and other parts of this, other parts of this world, Ferguson, but even going back to the Watch riots in '66, going back to the LA riots in the 90s. We're seeing times, the Detroit riots, I believe, that were in the 40s. I mean, we're seeing all these different things that have happened throughout history. And we just have to ask, which of these were appropriate? Which of these weren't appropriate? Was it appropriate for the American Indian movement? Was it appropriate for them to take over Wounded Knee and do something with it? Was it appropriate for Ruby Ridge or Waco? Where's the line drawn? And have the conversation of where the line should be drawn moving forward, as opposed to what happened on January 6th. The Demas' family has been in the restaurant business for many generations. We have been serving people in the Middle Tennessee market for 34 years. Try our spaghetti kits, our pot roast, which we slow cook for 4 hours, or our world famous baked chicken and rice soup, which many locals have dubbed Greek penicillin for when you feel under the weather. We make our food fresh, and upon placing our order with us, we freeze the order and send it to your house. Demas' is more than a business. 5 generations of restaurant operators have taught us many things about food, but more importantly, we have recognized that we don't sell food. We sell the experience of bringing people and families together, which our country desperately needs. So go to demasfamilykitchen.com and share in this journey today. And for right now, use the code UNCOMMON to get 10% off of your order. That's demasfamilykitchen.com. I think it's also appropriate to ask questions. And again, I don't think the questions are necessarily designed as a means of a getcha question, as an ambush question. But the Bible tells us that we have to break down strongholds. The Bible tells us that we're basically going to follow the philosophies of man instead of the Word of God. And sometimes the only way we can tear down strongholds, because we don't recognize we're under the stronghold ourselves a lot of times. So sometimes the only way that we can tear down strongholds is when we are when we're hitting rock bottom, which no one wants to go through that. But I think another way to tear down strongholds is by having people kind of question and kind of challenge you a little bit. And again, do it in a loving way, but allow them to see the weakness in their arguments on this. There is a great Bible teacher out there, or a great apologetics teacher out there, I should say, named Greg Koukl. He wrote a book called Tactics. He has a follow-up book, which I have not read, on it as well. But Tactics is an outstanding book that allows you to be able to engage with others in a way that hopefully you could just start kind of planting a seed. And you can start planting a seed and allow someone else to kind of take over and water it and go from there. This is an incredible resource that we need to have, and it's very important for us to be able to use this at Thanksgiving. So you can, if they talk about these problems, you can say, well, what do you think the current administration can do to solve these problems? What do you think they can do? Now, okay, you think they ought to give reparations on it. Well, logistically, how does that work? Logistically, who has to pay, who gets it, how do we determine whether or not you were, whether you were behind because of slavery or not slavery? What do you consider to be somebody? What percentage of African American do you need to have? Well, any of these type of questions I think are good. And what you're doing is you're challenging them on the logistics piece of their argument without being aggressive. You're sitting there saying, look, we're here to look at the future. We're looking at a common problem that you see as a problem that we need to address. And I don't see where that is. Now, a lot of it, though, is when they turn it back on you. Here's something that I see so many Christians fail at, and I see so many conservatives fail at this too. We're too scared to say, I don't know. I don't know is a great answer. I don't know, but I'll find out is an even better answer. But just say, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I really don't know. I think it's a really good question. Let me research that and get back with you. These are legitimate answers. I really don't know. What do you think? I don't know. I kind of struggle with that, but I don't really have a better answer than what you got right now. Let me think about it. Sometimes I may even know the answer and will say I don't know in order to not come across as a jerk, as a know-it-all, as a means of putting somebody else's down. I think that's okay. That's appropriate to be able to do so. I think the other thing that we have to do is we got to acknowledge the flaws that we have in the candidates we supported. And again, I'm going to focus on Trump because he is presidential, but this is true with your governors, your mayors, your state and federal reps. We have to acknowledge that they're flawed. One of the issues that I see so many people have that they didn't understand about this last election is they didn't understand that when we were really big supporters of Trump, that it wasn't because we saw Trump as some type of god or demigod that is here to save us from everything. Many of us were like, this is a person who is wanting to enact policies that more align with our views, and this is a person, and we are against the person who frankly is promoting a level of evil in our country that we've never seen before, and not just wanting to promote policies of it, but actually promoting the evil itself. And so as a result of that, part of the problem is because we weren't willing to say, yeah, Trump can be kind of cringy. He's been married 3 times. By the way, the person he appointed for Department of Health and Human Services married 3 times. You look at many people in his cabinet, and they are not they shouldn't be the moral standards that we set forth to look at as far as people goes. Now, they might be able to enact policies that will help us from a moral perspective. And that's awesome and that's great. And we ought to be mindful. We ought to watch for this. But we can't watch for this as long as we're taking this hardline stance. We don't want to do it for two reasons. One, it pushes somebody off. If you can't acknowledge the fact that there's flaws in the people that you support and the people that you may even love, you're not going to get anything from them. You're not going to break down any barriers. In fact, you're going to build up stronger barriers, thicker barriers in their own minds. But the other thing too is that when you find out that they're flawed, and when you see something and they do something that is morally reprehensible, which again, likelihood will happen. It's just because we're people, we mess up. Trump is a person, he's going to mess up. But when we find something like that, and we've taken this hardline approach that no matter what, 100% all in, instead of I'm about 90% in favor of them, 10% I'm not. Instead of having that approach of saying that I'm 100% all in, then later when it comes back, it's so much more difficult for us to come back and say, no, not on board. Not on board, because we have to try to maintain and hold to our position, and therefore then we start making up facts, we start changing the narratives, we start attacking people in response. And if you don't believe that can happen, look at the other side. Look at what's happened to the Democratic Party and the people that were supporting the Democratic movement from the 1960s up until now. You can see them. They were the champions of free speech and anti-censorship, and now they are in favor of free speech and censorship. It just baffles me how much has just radically changed on them. But part of it is because they took this hardline stance and they never wanted to change it. They're kicking people out of the Democratic Party. You can listen to my interview with John DeBerry, and you'll see they kicked him out of the Democratic Party after he won the primary. Served in the state of Tennessee for 26 years because he wouldn't agree with them on one thing because of his faith. That type of behavior is reprehensible, but we're open to it too. And unless we start acknowledging the flaws that we have so that we know the areas of which we need to improve, or the flaws of the candidates that we have so that we can at least hold them a little bit more accountable for these issues, then that is one of the ways that we can engage in a more respectful conversation with other people that are there. We will allow the other side to soften. They'll be like, okay, well, he's not as extreme as these other people. Even if everybody that they think is so extreme is not. Even if they think that. By us doing that, they will elevate you over those other people that are there. It is a tremendous, valuable technique in order to engage with your family, in order to engage with your friends this season. And again, like I said, I'm looking at this from more of the Trump perspective. And the reason why also is most of the people that listened to me probably voted for Trump. But I'm also, for those who didn't, and I think this applies in both areas, this applies to you too. If you were against Trump, let's just say it the other way. Let's say if Harris won, we still had an obligation to react and respond in the exact same fashion. We have to say, what are you going to do in the future? Yeah, I recognize my candidate was flawed. I like yours less. That's okay to say stuff like that. But what are we going to do? How are we going to focus on this? What is she going to do about the border? Because she hasn't done anything so far. We can ask those type of questions. We can engage in those type of conversations. Again, there's different levels. A lot of times we see these people give up and give speeches, or we see them, and in that particular situation, it's completely different. It's not a conversation. They're talking to in a political rally. If you were to invite me to a political rally, I will be a lot more outspoken than I am having this conversation with you or having a conversation with my family. It doesn't mean that I'm going to change my views. It means that I'm going to address the audience with my views in a certain way. But if I'm going to be talking with my liberal niece, and I'm going to be talking with her about it, I'm not going to be using the rhetoric of a political rally. The reason why is because it's not effective. It's not effective because my job is to try to, again, break down barriers, soften her heart. My job is to protect that family. I want her to be able to come back. I want her to feel comfortable. I want her that if there's a struggle that's happening in her life, I want her to feel comfortable being able to come and talk with me. But if I put up all these things around her, she's not going to feel comfortable. And then where's she going to go? Social media? I want her to be able to come and talk with me. The next thing is be mindful of your emotions. Manage them. It's politics. It changes. It radically changes. Your views have probably changed throughout the years when it's come to politics on different levels and different things. I'm amazed at how much further to the right that I have gone by standing still. But I've also changed quite a bit as well. I was very much of before I was a Christian, I was pro-choice. Before I was a Christian, I believed in didn't necessarily believe in gay marriage, but in Acts 5, we see that when Peter and the other disciples were ordered to stop talking about Jesus, they responded, "We obey God and not man." In 2020, we saw something we never thought we could see in this country. They shut down our churches. After decades of removing God from schools and public institutions, they went straight at our community. Unfortunately, we as Christians did not know what to do. And even worse, we chose to listen to false prophets masquerading as Christians on how to respond. I recognize this is the only beginning, and we need to know how to respond. We have a duty to say no to unjust laws, but as Christians, we have a greater duty to God. In my book, On the Duty of Christian Civil Disobedience, I use biblical teachings to help believers know when and how to stand up to those in charge when they ask us to commit evil. You can go to peterdemas.org to find out about our duty to say no. And when you type in the code UNCOMMON, you can get 10% off your order. That's UNCOMMON at peterdemas.org. Remember, we are to obey God and not man. I believed in more rights for members of the LGBT community than what I believe now. I do believe there still should be rights for the members of the LGBT community. Don't confuse me on that. That's not... we have basic human rights that God has given us, and there are legal rights that man has given us that I think that should be afforded protection no matter what. But at the same time, I do think that marriage is not one of those rights. And I think we have to be very careful, and we have to be mindful of where that line is, and we have to be able to open that door to allow us to say, okay, wait a second, I might have been a little too extreme. I might be wrong. There might be an exception to my rule. We might be able to do that. And we cannot do that as long as we allow ourselves to be emotionally tied into this. If the conversation's getting heated, here's a great phrase. Let me think about that. Let me think about that. That's an easy phrase. I'm not 100%. Let me think about that. Let me look that up. Again, I'll get back with you. You're wanting to do that for a couple reasons. One, you're wanting to delay it. You're wanting to delay the conversation. Because if you feel yourself getting a rise, you're going to do no one any good whatsoever. All you're doing is you're just going to destroy every opening that you have had with them. Now again, if they're being belligerent, don't match their belligerence. But you can calmly and ask them to calm down. You can say, look, I know we can disagree, and that's perfectly fine. I'll tell you what, why don't we just have this conversation another time when you're a little bit more ready for it, or when it's not so personal to you. And I understand, well, it is personal to me, and they can all mad and everything with it. But we still have an obligation as Christians to serve as peacemakers. Now again, being a peacemaker does not necessarily mean agreeing with the other side. We're not talking about the peacemaker approach that Andy Stanley and the guy from VeggieTales and many others that are out there. We're not talking about that type of peacemaking. I'm talking about peacemaking of when you see you're going to get nowhere because they're emotional, or where you see you're going to get nowhere because you're getting emotional. Take a breath, think it through, and go from there. Excuse yourself and go to the bathroom. The bathroom is an outstanding place for you to be able to collect yourself. You can do several things in the bathroom. One, you can spend time in the bathroom and no one's questioning you why, unless you spend 30 minutes in there. They might get a little worried and might go in there with a can of Febreze. But seriously, like when you go into the bathroom, you can also run cold water over your hands. Maybe even dot your face off a little bit with it. When you physically feel cooler, your emotions and you mentally will feel cooler as well. When you go there, you can get yourself calmed down. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. It's a nice, simple technique. It is amazing when you see the science behind that. When you're under stress, when you're under the stressful times, the front of your brain moves from colors, if you're looking at it under scan, and starts turning gray as everything starts moving back to your fight, flight, or freeze response. So when this is happening and when you start to breathe, you start bringing that back to your front, which is where you want to be. You want to be in your critical thinking stage. Another thing, when you go in there, think about other questions. If they're not going to let it go, if they're going to keep pounding and pounding and pounding you, and they're not wanting to let it go, and you don't have a control in whether or not to settle or change the conversation or anything with it, and you recognize you have to, think about new questions that you're going to ask. And when you ask questions, don't ask questions always that just deal necessarily with politics. You might just completely change the question on it. Ask them, you lived in multiple places. What was your favorite part? What was your favorite, where, and then why? Why was this your favorite, why was this your favorite subject in school? Anything like that. Hey, do you remember a time, your birthday when you were like 6 years old? Do you remember that birthday party? I don't care what it is, but ask questions that might be unrelated to it, something they might be interested in talking about. Again, talk about football, talk about sports. May not be a football fan. That's okay. What if they're a fan of a sport that you know nothing about? Let's say they're a fan of F1 racing, and that's the only thing they do. And like for me, I don't know anything about F1 racing. My daughter is a big F1 racing fan. I could care less. I couldn't tell you one thing about it outside of the pictures that I have seen on a movie screen or something like that. That's about all I can tell you about F1 racing. But I can tell you this, I can ask enough questions about F1 racing to get any situation calmed down if someone's an F1 racing fan, because I don't know enough about it. And I'm then referring to their expertise in a matter. So I may disagree with you politically, but that doesn't mean that they are stupid in every single thing they believe in. I've been around a lot of stupid people. I've worked in restaurants since I was 12 years old. There are many people who've come in who are customers and many people we've hired as employees who are galactically stupid in some of the things. And I've learned things from so many of them. Even the ones that I'm like, I don't even know how on earth you managed to get your pants on. There are those type of people that I've engaged with, but yet I've learned something from, because everybody has passions. Again, as I said very early on, we're made up of a mind, body, heart, and spirit. What is their heart for? It's not only for politics. It's not only for social justice. It's not only for Marxism and critical race theory. Don't pigeonhole them into only that. Change the conversations. So when you go into that bathroom, when you just to manage your emotions, and when you're going to do something like that, go in there and think about different subjects that you can have. It might be a good idea for you to do that when you go into there. Don't start off with that. Don't start off. Don't play your wild card right from the very beginning. But hold on to certain things so that if you have to change the subject in order to get yourself calmed emotionally, or possibly get them calmed emotionally, that is one of the ways in which we're able to do it. But we have to be able to manage our emotions. At the end of the day, the reason why I think it's so important for us to know this and learn this is because, again, we have to do whatever it takes in order to try to protect the family, which is what God has ordained for us. That is part of our responsibility. Part of our job as a Christian is to be able to help support it. And when we see Satan attack, and we see him attack in the family in all these different areas, in all these different ways, we know that the only way that we're going to be able to battle this is we're going to have to be able to battle it in a way that is different than a full frontal assault when it comes to this. Satan is a deceiver. And sometimes the only way that we can help expose that deception is by shining light on it, is by exposing it to the truth. But we can't expose it to the truth when we don't invite people over for Thanksgiving. Sometimes the people that we have for Thanksgiving, it's the only time I see them. I only maybe get, just a few hours a year with some of these people. And that's part of my responsibility and part of what I have to do. So I encourage each of you to invite the family members that you don't like. Invite and again, that you don't like politically. If you don't like them because they're, again, just terrible human beings and they're going to steal from you, and and use your bathroom without flushing or whatever situation happens to be, if you're gonna, that's okay. But if you want to not invite family because you might disagree with them, change your mindset, change your approach, encourage them. And for those who already say, I can't come because I disagree with you politically on it, say, look, I can't promise that we aren't going to talk about politics, but I would really want you to come because I love you and I want you to show up at my house. I want you to be here. I want to celebrate because I am thankful for you. And even though we may disagree, I'm thankful for what you've done in my life, because I wouldn't be inviting you if you did not have an impact in my life. And I think so often people don't know that and they don't understand that about themselves. And I think you may think you have expressed that with them. But I think it's so important to reiterate that and continue to push them in these areas. So thank you so much for listening, and I pray that you have an incredible Thanksgiving. And I hope that you could take some of this and be able to use this to create peace at your dinner table over pumpkin pie, and to be able, as my friend calls it, pumpkin pie politics, and be able to engage in pumpkin pie politics. But recognize too, it doesn't just end here. We got Christmas following right around the corner. And a lot of these same situations and these same problems are going to be occurring then as well. And again, we have to rise above. We have to set the standard. And that standard is not us. Our standard is to point people to Christ, because He is our true standard. And as long as we can show that what we do and why we do it is because of Him, then hopefully then people will start looking to Him for the answers. And then we'll start to see some real change take place. Thank you so much, and God bless you.